I have a very special guest here, first time in Croatia, Diego Garcia, sports marketing at Nike. Diego, how you doing?
Amazing, man. I love this. You can't go wrong here. So experience has been amazing. I'm feeling great. The festival has been unbelievable. So really good.
You told me right when you sat down, you said it's my first time in Croatia.
Yes.
The festival's not even done yet.
Yes.
You still have plenty of panels, and you said I'm already thinking about how I got to come back next year.
I'm already trying to make plans. How can I come back here? Because as I mentioned, I didn't know what to expect. Obviously, you hear a lot of things about Croatia, Zadar, Split, especially Zadar. But I didn't know what to expect. And once I got here, it blew my mind. Obviously, the festival itself, it's amazing. But the city, the weather is so beautiful, it's so chill. Yeah. So it makes me want to come back right away.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
You got in when? Just a couple days ago?
A couple days ago, yeah.
And you already love it?
Yeah, I already love it. Awesome. The boat trip yesterday.
Yeah, the boat was fun.
The beach over here, just amazing. The water is so beautiful. It's just good.
That was my experience 4 years ago.
Yes.
Somehow I keep getting invited
here again. Yes.
Year after year.
You might be here for me 4 years from now.
Yeah.
I might be here, saying the same thing to the next person. So.
Bro, hopefully.
Yeah.
So you're from Brazil. You live in Brazil?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Brazil,
okay.
But I live in the States now. I live in Los Angeles.
Awesome.
I've been got transferred there for work, so I've been living in the States for about 4 years now, almost 5 years.
You like LA?
I love LA, man. I think LA, it's similar to Brazil in a way. The culture is very diverse. Obviously the weather is also really nice, and there's a lot of business in LA too, which is the reason why I moved to LA. So I like it a lot.
Your story is pretty fascinating. You went to Harvard as well, but you're doing so many important things at Nike, and we'll get into that. But how did you get started, and then how did you end up going to Harvard?
Yeah, so play a little ball in Brazil. Grew up playing basketball in Brazil. That was my passion.
Basketball in Brazil.
Basketball in Brazil.
Is it popular?
Yes, it's really popular. People don't know basketball is really popular in Brazil. Obviously, Brazil is massive, and soccer is super popular. So I think that's why a lot of people.
I almost didn't even ask.
Yeah, exactly.
I was about to say, football, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, he's gonna be like,
yes.
Of course.
I mean, football is part of whatever you do in Brazil growing up. But basketball is also really big in Brazil.
Really? You never knew that.
We have had a lot of guys going to the NBA. Like the Leandro Barbosas of the world, Anderson Varejão, and all those guys. There's also a very strong league in Brazil. So basketball is really important in Brazil. I think it has the potential to get even bigger, but people would be surprised about how big basketball is in Brazil.
I never would have made that connection. How'd you get into it? Was it somebody in your family? Was it the kids in your neighborhood?
Yeah, I mean, my uncle gave me this basketball and this Michael Jordan jersey. I didn't really know what basketball was. And then it was right around Space Jam, when Space Jam came out.
Yeah.
And then I think everything clicked, and I was like, okay, this is my thing. And then from there, I never looked back, and then started playing in Brazil, play a little bit, kind of at a junior level. Never really wanted to make it to the pro level. It was really my passion. And then graduated in marketing and advertising. I was doing something completely different, but then at some point I was like, I gotta do something that I really, really love. My career gotta be about something that I love. And then I was like, okay, I love sports, love basketball, love sports. I love marketing. And then I was like, okay, there's this thing called sports marketing, that in Brazil at that point, it was a little bit people didn't know what sports marketing really was.
How old were you at the time?
I was probably about 16, 17.
Okay, so young.
Yeah, I was young. Yeah, I was young. I want to say probably 19, 18, because that's when I was in college. I'm like, okay, I want to know what this thing is about. This might be my thing, and long story short, yes, so I went and got a degree in sports marketing, and then I was trying to get into the industry, right? Nike was the brand that I loved. Basketball was again my passion. I'm like, okay, I want to do sports marketing, at Nike. Then I realized how hard it was, so it took me 4 years to get a job at Nike, My first job didn't have anything to do with sports marketing. I was a customer service rep for the sales team.
Nice.
I was entering orders, for the Foot Lockers of the world in Brazil. I was entering orders for, those guys. which was really good. Looking back, was really good because
did you learn some stuff?
It helped me like understand how the company worked from like logistics, operations, sales, and all that. And then at some point, I got an opportunity with a sports marketing team. And in basketball, I was, overseeing like, we sponsored the Basketball Confederation in Brazil, so the national team and all that. So that's how it started, and then from there, got transferred to LA, and then here I am now.
And then in the middle of all that, just Harvard. No biggie.
And then Harvard happened too. There's this program at Harvard called the Business of Entertainment and Sports, and obviously caught my eyes. I had a couple people who I knew, went there, and also they have athletes going to that same program, which was the one thing.
Oh, do they?
I think like Dirk Nowitzki, some guys, I think Dwayne Wade, so I'm like.
Were they in your class?
No, not in my class,
okay.
But over the years, I was always seeing that. I was like, that's really interesting. And at some point, I wanna apply. Applied the first year, they didn't select me, and then finally it came back next year, and then I got selected, and it was amazing. Awesome. One of the best experiences that I had, and that was actually how I got here, through some of my connections in Harvard. Someone hit me up and was like, hey, we have this festival, in Croatia. I think you would be a great fit. You don't have to go there to represent Nike. You can represent yourself, just your experience and all that, which is what I did here. So again, I didn't know what to expect, and then I'm here now, and I'm like, you guys got to know this. This is super cool. Like, the level of networking here, the level of panels, the amount of stuff that I learned in like 2 days here. It's amazing. Big, sports brains here, business brains here. So, yeah, people got to check out.
That's awesome. We'd love to hear it.
Yeah.
I want to hear a little bit more about like what you're doing on the day-to-day. Like what's some stuff that you're handling that people maybe know about, or some behind the scenes to what you're working on.
Yeah, so I basically, handle athletes, for Nike, but that has been my career. Focus on like, developing athletes' business, connecting the dots with, the companies and the company that I work for. I've worked with a lot of guys, in Brazil. I worked with those guys that I mentioned, Leandro Barbosa, Verjão. Worked with some of the football guys as well, like Ronaldinho, R10, Vinny Jr., just in a couple, events. But, being around those guys too.
Work with Ronaldinho?
Yes. I had the opportunity to be around him for like, a few times.
What'd you do with Ronaldinho?
We did a couple of things, around the World Cup. When Kobe went to Brazil, I think in 2013, we connected them because, Ronaldinho is a big, basketball fan, and Kobe, rest in peace, Kobe was a big basketball guy too. So that was one of the things that we did together. And now I'm focusing on some of the NBA players. Ja Morant is one of my guys.
That's a big one.
Yeah, so that's a little bit of what I do.
Yeah, I want to dive deeper onto Ja, because obviously he's somebody that a lot of people will know, but also just like the behind the scenes of you handling their account, what goes into it, even when they have a signature shoe. Yeah. Like what's the dynamics, and how do you speak with them and present them ideas? How does that usually work?
Yeah, I'll say the same thing that I said during my panel. I think for me, my personal approach, even beyond Nike, this is not necessarily, but my personal approach is always like, treat those guys as human beings first. Like I got to be able to connect with the human being, and then I'll be able to understand the athlete. That guy that we see doing stuff on the court, on the pitch, or whatever, that's one of their angles, but they're also human beings that want to be treated as human beings as well.
So how do you develop that trust? Because it could be hard.
It's not easy.
They get screwed over by a lot of people.
Exactly, you got the point. They have a lot of people around them trying to connect with them for various reasons. So it's not easy. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of patience. I have been to many situations where I traveled to see this one guy, and the guy just like said, "What's up?" and walked past me, And it's part like once you start learning that dynamic, it takes time, and it's got to be natural. Like you can't force. Again, in my experience, I think if you try to force, if you try to do too much, that's when guys, will push you away. But if you just look genuinely at that, to try to help them, to try to understand them, at some point it's gonna happen. It's not always, but eventually, it happens. So.
Yeah, definitely. It's the most important thing is to build that human connection, and then you could always take it to the next level. Have you been in any situations that you could give like examples of, times that you've been able to present things or different projects that maybe people will know about?
Yeah, I mean, it happens. It happens all the time. I think once you have that personal connection, it's much easier for you to come up with like new ideas because you're able to see beyond kind of the obvious, what people can see on TV or maybe on social media. Again, that's probably like 40 to 50% of what those guys are. I think we saw yesterday here a panel with Steve Miocic. I'm a huge UFC guy. I've been following that guy for so many years. I'd had no clue that he was like so easygoing, had such a cool personality. So I think that for me right there is an example of like something that I was like, wow, there's so much more about that guy. And I think to answer to your question, that's when you're able to come up with like new ideas. For a guy like Steve now, like you could think about like a podcast for him, or something like that, just because now you're able to see something beyond what I used to see on the cage, or doing fights and all that. So I guess that's a little bit of the approach.
And I think his personality was the most marketable thing because I hadn't heard him speak before, but my God, he was hilarious. He was so honest, and you're drawn to that because a lot of people are trying to put on some sort of show and protect themselves and look as the best version of themselves, and he was just like organically him.
And I think, not to cut you off, sorry, but I think what you said makes a lot of sense. And I think, obviously Steve is from like an older generation of athletes, like millennials and all that. I'm seeing Gen Z athletes, they want to be themselves the whole time.
Okay.
I think in the past, guys had to, put up, that face a little bit because everything was like TV, interviews, something more formal. I think now with acknowledging cell phones and social media, those guys, they want to be themselves the whole time, which is amazing, right? Because you're able to expand their brands much more than on a regular way that we used to know in the past.
Absolutely. And how do you create that storyline? Because everyone's trying to tell stories, right? What does that mean to you? And is this like a sort of conversation that you have to have with an athlete, with like a Ja, for example? And like, how do you brainstorm it out in your mind?
Yeah, I think it goes both ways, with those guys. I think, at the same time, they don't know what they don't know. So I think it's our job to also like show them maybe a size of their brand that they don't know, or how to approach, a topic that they don't really know how to do. So I think that's when the relationship is super important, right? You got to be able to sit down with them like, hey, I know that you have this idea, but this is a better approach, and I know from experience, I know because I've done it in the past. Or maybe it's the opposite, maybe we know how to do something in a way, but then they're going to come with like something different, and they're like, okay, maybe we'll try your approach this time. So it's got to be both ways, I think the relationship again is going to be the key for you, because if you can have this conversation, and obviously guys have, their managers, their marketing guys, and a lot of times you're having those conversations with them. But again, this is just my experience. I feel like you have to be able to speak to the athlete at some point, So I think that's what, helps just come up with like new ideas and fresh ideas, because it's a lot of noise too these days, right?
100%.
So you have to be able to cut through that noise. And I think for the new audience, it's got to be something compelling. It's got to be something that they can actually connect with. Otherwise, it's just going to be like scroll and then go to the next thing.
It's true. That's why you have a tough job.
Yes.
We appreciate you sitting down with us, Diego.
For sure, man. Thank you for having me.
I hope you enjoy Sunset, and I hope I'm here next year, and I hope you're here as well.
I'm definitely coming back.
Pleasure, bro.
Thank you, man.
Thanks,
appreciate
man.
it. Yeah.
Bravo.
Good. That was
stuff,
good.
Man.
Yeah.